Princess Zara of the Keltharian Empire stood before the massive crystal mirrors in her palace chambers, adjusting the flowing silk of her ceremonial gown. The fabric shimmered with threads of pure starlight, a material so rare that only 12 gowns like it existed in the known galaxy. Today she would marry a human. The thought still felt strange in her mind. Humans were such a young species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel a few centuries ago. They were considered useful for their surprising adaptability and their odd ability to survive in environments that would kill most civilized beings, but they were hardly sophisticated. Most galactic citizens viewed them as clever pets at best. Her marriage to Marcus Chen was purely political, of course. The human government needed access to Keltharian trade routes, and her father, Emperor Valdris, saw an opportunity to gain a foothold in the rapidly expanding human territories. What better way than to bind one of their most promising diplomats to the royal family? Zara had met Marcus only 3 times before today. He seemed pleasant enough, she supposed. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and brown eyes that held a certain warmth when he smiled. But during their brief conversations, he had struck her as rather simple. He spoke in basic galactic standard, asked elementary questions about Keltharian culture, and seemed genuinely impressed by things that any educated being should already know. "Your Highness," her attendant Siren entered the chamber, bowing low. "The ceremony begins in 1 hour. The human delegation has arrived." Zara nodded, trying to summon some enthusiasm for the day ahead. At least Marcus seemed kind. That was more than many royal marriages could claim. And humans, despite their limitations, were said to be remarkably loyal to their mates. Perhaps that would make up for the intellectual conversation she would surely miss. The great hall of the palace could hold 10,000 beings, and today every seat was filled. Representatives from across the Galactic Council had come to witness this historic union. The Keltharian Empire rarely married outside their own species, and never before to a human. As Zara made her way down the aisle, her gown trailing behind her in a river of liquid light, she caught sight of the human delegation. They were smaller than most of the other species present, and their clothing, while formal, seemed almost plain compared to the elaborate robes and bioluminescent displays of the other ambassadors. Marcus stood at the altar, dressed in a simple black suit that she recognized as traditional human formal wear. He looked calm, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched her approach. When their eyes met, he offered her a gentle smile that, despite everything, made her feel slightly more at ease. The ceremony itself was a blend of Keltharian and human traditions. Zara recited the ancient vows of her people in their melodic native tongue, while Marcus spoke his promises in English, which was then translated for the assembled crowd. The translator made his words sound stilted and formal, but when he spoke directly to her in galactic standard, there was something in his voice that made her look at him more carefully. "I promise to stand beside you," he said, his brown eyes steady on hers, "in whatever comes." Something in the way he said it made it sound less like a ceremonial vow and more like a genuine commitment. For a moment, Zara felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. After the ceremony came the reception, a grand affair that would last well into the planet's long night. Zara found herself seated beside Marcus at the high table, accepting congratulations from an endless stream of dignitaries and nobles. Your Highness, Ambassador Krell of the Thandorian Collective approached their table, his forearms spreading in a gesture of respect. "May I say how interesting this union is? Tell me, young human." He turned to Marcus. "What do you make of our Keltharian customs? Rather different from your traditional ways, I imagine." Zara felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment at the ambassador's rudeness, but Marcus simply smiled. "Every culture has its own wisdom, Ambassador. I find Keltharian traditions fascinating. The way your people have woven scientific advancement with spiritual harmony is remarkable. It reminds me of some of the ancient Earth philosophies, actually." Krell's eye stalks twitched with what Zara recognized as surprise. "Oh, and which philosophies would those be?" "The Tao Te Ching speaks of the balance between opposites, much like your people's concept of the twin stars principle. The idea that advancement and inner peace must grow together, or neither can truly flourish." Now Zara was staring at her new husband in surprise. The twin stars principle was not something typically taught to outsiders. It was a fundamental concept in Keltharian philosophy, but one that required years of study to truly understand. How did a human diplomat know about it? Krell's attitude shifted noticeably. You've studied our philosophical texts? When possible, Marcus replied modestly, though I'm sure my understanding is quite elementary compared to those who grew up with these teachings. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself paying closer attention to Marcus's conversations. When the Arcturian trade minister questioned him about interstellar economics, Marcus discussed market theories that she had to admit were quite sophisticated. When the Vegan Science Council member began debating the ethics of genetic modification, Marcus held his own with arguments that were both logical and compassionate. By the time the last guest departed, Zara was thoroughly confused. The man she had married seemed entirely different from the simple diplomat she thought she knew. Thank you, Marcus said as they walked together toward the royal quarters that would now be their shared home. I know this wasn't easy for you. What do you mean? She asked. Marrying someone you barely know, someone from a species that most of your people consider beneath them. He said it without bitterness, simply stating a fact. Zara felt a stab of guilt. I don't think humans are beneath us, she said quickly. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her, that gentle smile playing at the corners of his mouth again. Princess Zara, you don't have to pretend. I understand the political necessities that brought us together. I just want you to know that I'll do my best to be a good husband to you, regardless of the circumstances. Looking into his eyes, Zara realized that perhaps she had been the simple one after all. The next morning would bring new revelations. But for now, as they stood in the soft light of Kelthera's twin moons, Princess Zara wondered what other surprises her new husband might hold. 3 weeks into their marriage, Zara was beginning to realize that living with Marcus was nothing like what she had expected. For one thing, he was awake before dawn every morning, not because of any royal duties, but because he chose to be. She discovered this quite by accident when she woke early one morning with a headache from the previous evening's state dinner. The suite was quiet, and she assumed Marcus was still sleeping. In the adjoining bedroom, they had agreed he would use until they were more comfortable with each other. But when she stepped onto the balcony that overlooked the palace gardens, hoping the fresh air would help her head, she spotted a familiar figure moving through the training grounds below. Marcus was there, alone, going through what appeared to be some kind of exercise routine, but it wasn't like any Keltharian physical conditioning she had ever seen. His movements were fluid and precise, like a carefully choreographed dance, but there was something powerful about the way he moved that made her watch more closely. He was practicing some form of combat. She realized, though without any opponent or even training equipment, just his body moving through sequences of strikes, blocks, and defensive positions, with a grace that spoke of years of training. When he finished, he didn't immediately head back inside. Instead, he sat on a bench in the garden and pulled out a small device that Zara didn't recognize. It looked human-made, simpler than Keltharian technology, but Marcus began working with it in a way that suggested it was far from simple. Curious despite herself, Zara made her way down to the garden. Good morning, she called softly as she approached, not wanting to startle him. Marcus looked up and smiled, quickly putting the device away. Good morning, Princess. You're up early. I had a headache, she said, then hesitated. What were you doing just now? That fighting routine? Just keeping in practice, he said, standing and brushing off his simple workout clothes. Old habits. Practice for what? Diplomatic functions rarely require hand-to-hand combat skills, Marcus chuckled. You'd be surprised. But mostly it helps me think clearly. Physical discipline and mental discipline go together in my experience. Zara found herself studying his face, looking for answers to questions she couldn't quite articulate. Where did you learn to fight like that? Here and there, he said vaguely. Humans pick up all sorts of skills in our travels. It was a non-answer, polite but revealing nothing. Zara was beginning to notice that Marcus was very good at those. Later that morning, they attended a routine council meeting together. As Marcus's wife, Zara was expected to help him understand the political landscape of the Keltharian court. The session was meant to be a simple briefing on trade negotiations with the Rigelian Mining Consortium. The Rigelians are straightforward, Zara explained as they walked to the council chamber. They value efficiency and profit above all else. They tend to be impatient with what they see as unnecessary ceremony. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. What about their cultural concept of honor debt? Zara stopped walking.
They're what?
Honor debt. In Regelian society, if someone does you a significant favor, you're obligated to repay it in kind, often with interest. It's not quite the same as a legal contract, but it's binding in their culture. I thought that might be relevant to the negotiations. Zara stared at him. Honor debt was an obscure aspect of Rigelian culture that most Keltharians didn't know about. It wasn't covered in standard diplomatic briefings.
How do you know about that?
I read about it somewhere, Marcus said with that same modest tone he always used when demonstrating knowledge that surprised her. The council meeting proceeded smoothly until Counselor Drex, one of her father's more aggressive advisors, began pushing for terms that Zara knew the Rigelians would find insulting. We should demand exclusive mining rights to the Kepler sector, Drex insisted. The Rigelians need our rare earth deposits more than we need their common metals. Marcus, who had been quietly listening, cleared his throat. Counselor Drex, may I ask a question? Drex looked annoyed at being interrupted by a human, but protocol required him to be polite to the princess's husband. Of course. Have you considered how the Rigelians might interpret exclusive rights in the context of their territorial expansion over the past decade? Drex's expression became uncertain. What do you mean? Well, they've been very careful to avoid any agreements that could be seen as precedents for territorial concessions. If we ask for exclusive rights to a sector they consider strategically important, they might see it as the first step toward claiming sovereignty over their mining operations in general. The room was suddenly very quiet. What Marcus had just outlined was a sophisticated analysis of Rigelian political psychology that would have taken most diplomats years to develop. Where did you learn about Rigelian expansion policies? Counselor Vash asked, her tone sharp with suspicion. I try to stay informed about galactic politics, Marcus replied calmly. It seems important for someone in my position. Emperor Valdris, who had been silent throughout the exchange, leaned forward. Marcus, what would you suggest instead? Perhaps we could frame it as a joint venture with mutual oversight? The Rigelians keep their autonomy. We get guaranteed access to the resources we need, and both sides benefit from shared mining technology. Everyone saves face. It was, Zara had to admit, a brilliant solution, simple enough to be practical, sophisticated enough to address everyone's real concerns. After the meeting, as they walked back to their quarters, Zara decided to ask the question that had been bothering her all morning. Marcus, what did you do before you became a diplomat? He was quiet for a long moment. Various things, he said finally. I've had an interesting life. That's not really an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. That evening, Zara decided to do some research of her own. She accessed the palace's extensive database and looked up Marcus's official biography. What she found was surprisingly sparse. Born on Earth, educated at various institutions, served in several diplomatic posts, recommended for the Keltharian assignment by the human government. But the details were vague. No specific schools were mentioned. No previous posts were described in detail. No family background was provided beyond the basic facts. For someone supposedly qualified for such an important diplomatic mission, his official record was remarkably thin. She was about to close the file when something caught her eye. Buried in the appendix was a single line. Additional background information classified under Human Government Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Zara didn't know what that meant, but she knew someone who might. The next morning, she contacted her childhood friend Nira, who worked in Galactic Intelligence. Zara, congratulations on your marriage, Nira said when the call connected. How are you finding married life? Educational, Zara said dryly. Nira, can you tell me anything about Human Government Protocol 7? Nira's expression became guarded. Why do you ask? It came up in some research I was doing. I'm curious. Zara, Protocol 7 is, well, it's not something I can discuss casually. It relates to certain humans whose backgrounds are considered classified for security reasons. Security reasons. Let's just say that not all human diplomats are only diplomats. The call ended, leaving Zara with more questions than answers. As she sat in her study, watching Marcus through the window as he worked in the garden again, she began to wonder who she had really married. Outside, Marcus paused in his work and looked up at her window. For just a moment, his expression was different, alert, knowing. Then he smiled and waved, and he was just her friendly, simple husband again. but Zara was beginning to suspect that nothing about Marcus Chen was as simple as it seemed. The crisis began with what should have been a routine diplomatic reception. Ambassador Thys of the Zephyrian Confederacy had arrived with his delegation to discuss a new trade agreement, and the palace was hosting a formal dinner in their honor. Zara had been looking forward to the evening, partly because she was curious to see how Marcus would handle the Zephyrians. They were known for their complex social hierarchies and their tendency to test new acquaintances through verbal sparring that could quickly turn hostile. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Ambassador Thys was a tall reptilian being with silver scales and intelligent yellow eyes. He spoke eloquently about the potential benefits of increased trade between their peoples, and Marcus listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that seemed to please the ambassador. But Zara noticed something odd. Throughout the meal, Marcus's attention kept drifting to the Zephyrian security detail stationed around the room. His glances were casual, almost absent-minded, but there was something about the way he observed them that made her think of a hunting cat watching mice. "Tell me, Mr. Chen," Ambassador Thys said as the main course was served, "what does a human think of our Zephyrian concept of strength hierarchy? I understand your people have rather egalitarian ideas about social structure." It was a polite insult, the kind of casual condescension that Zara had heard directed at humans before. Marcus simply smiled. "Every society develops the structures that help it survive and thrive," he replied. "The Zephyrian emphasis on demonstrated competence has clearly served your people well. Though I've always been curious about how you handle situations where different types of strength are required." "Different types?" Thys's head tilted with interest. "Well, physical strength, intellectual strength, emotional resilience, strategic thinking. They don't always reside in the same individual. How does your hierarchy account for that?" It was a sophisticated question that showed deep understanding of Zephyrian culture, and Thys looked genuinely pleased. The conversation continued in this vein for some time, with Marcus proving himself an engaging and knowledgeable discussant. Then everything went wrong. It started with a strange sound from the kitchen, like breaking glass but somehow more violent. Then the lights flickered, and an emergency alert began flashing on the wall displays. "Security breach in the south wing," Captain Valdox of the Palace Guard announced over the communication system. "All diplomatic personnel remain in place. Guard details to positions." Ambassador Thys's security team immediately moved to surround their delegation, weapons appearing in their hands with practiced speed. The Palace Guards took similar positions around the Keltharian nobles. "What's happening?" Zara asked Captain Valdox as he approached their table. "Unknown hostiles have infiltrated the palace," he replied tersely. "We're handling it, Your Highness, but protocol requires—" He never finished the sentence. The dining hall's main doors exploded inward, and armed figures in dark combat armor poured into the room. Zara had never seen armor like theirs. It was sleek, black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The beings wearing it moved with deadly purpose, and their weapons were already firing before the smoke from the doors had cleared. The palace guards responded immediately, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Zara watched in horror as Captain Valdox fell. A smoking hole burned through his chest by some kind of energy weapon. Ambassador Thys and his security team were fighting back, but these attackers were clearly professionals. They moved like a coordinated unit, covering each other's advances and eliminating resistance with ruthless efficiency. "Zara, get down," Marcus said, his voice suddenly different. Gone was the gentle diplomatic tone she was used to. This voice was sharp, commanding, and completely calm despite the chaos around them. She started to comply, but then she saw one of the attackers turn toward them, his weapon rising. Time seemed to slow as she realized that the energy blast was aimed directly at her. Then Marcus was moving. He didn't run or dive for cover like everyone else in the room. Instead, he flowed forward like water, his body twisting in ways that seemed impossible, as the energy blast passed harmlessly through the space where he had been a split second before. The attacker tried to track him, but Marcus was already too close. What happened next was so fast that Zara almost missed it. One moment the armored figure was standing, weapon raised. The next, he was on the ground, his neck bent at an unnatural angle, and Marcus was already moving toward the next threat. It was like watching a dance of death. Marcus moved through the attacking force like they were standing still. Every movement was precise, economical, and devastatingly effective. He didn't use any weapons, he didn't seem to need them. His hands, feet, and body became weapons of surgical precision. But it wasn't just his physical abilities that shocked Zara. It was the way he seemed to know exactly where each attacker would be, what they would do next. He moved with the confidence of someone who had not only seen combat before, but who had mastered it completely. Within 3 minutes, it was over. The surviving attackers, and there were only 3 of them left, had surrendered. Marcus stood in the center of the room, not even breathing hard, looking for all the world like he had just finished a mild workout. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Thys was the first to speak. "By the 7 moons of Zephyr," he whispered, "what in the galaxy was that?" Marcus looked around the room, taking in the stares of shock and fear from the assembled diplomats. When his eyes found Zara's, she saw something she had never seen there before. Not the gentle warmth she was used to, but a cold, calculating intelligence that made her shiver. "I apologize for the disruption," Marcus said, his diplomatic tone returning as if nothing had happened. "Is everyone all right?" Emperor Valdris, who had been protected by his personal guard during the attack, stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Marcus, I think we need to talk." "Of course, Your Majesty." "Now." As the room began to clear and medical teams arrived to tend to the wounded, Zara found herself unable to move. The man she had married, the one she had thought was simple and harmless, had just single-handedly defeated a team of professional assassins. "Princess?" Marcus was beside her now, his expression concerned. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at him, this stranger wearing her husband's face. "Who are you?" she whispered. For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "I'm your husband," he said quietly. "Everything else." "It's complicated." "Complicated?" Zara felt anger rising to replace her shock. "You just killed 6 people with your bare hands like it was nothing, and you call that complicated?" 7, actually, Marcus corrected automatically, then winced at his own words. "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot to process." "A lot to process?" Zara stood up, her legs shaky, but her voice growing stronger. "I've been living with someone I don't know at all. What else have you been lying about?" "I haven't lied to you," Marcus said, and she could hear genuine pain in his voice now. "I just haven't told you everything." "Everything? You haven't told me anything." Before Marcus could respond, a squad of palace guards arrived, their weapons drawn but uncertain. They had clearly been sent to secure the scene, but none of them seemed sure whether Marcus was a threat or a hero. "Stand down," Emperor Valdris commanded, as he returned to the dining hall. "Marcus, my study, now." As Marcus followed the Emperor out, he paused next to Zara. "I know you have questions," he said softly. "When this is over, I'll answer them. I promise." Watching him walk away, Zara realized that her comfortable life of thinking she understood the world around her was over. The simple human diplomat she had married was gone, replaced by someone who moved like a predator and fought like a weapon. The question now was, what else didn't she know about the man she had promised to spend her life with? And perhaps more importantly, was she married to someone who protected people or someone who simply killed them very efficiently? Outside the dining hall, she could hear her father's guards beginning their investigation, and she knew that whatever answers they found would change everything between her and Marcus forever. Zara couldn't sleep. She had been lying in her bed for hours, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed the events in the dining hall over and over. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus moving through those attackers like death itself, efficient and unstoppable. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on rest and made her way to the study. Perhaps some reading would help clear her thoughts. But when she reached the corridor leading to the library, she heard voices coming from her father's private office. She shouldn't have listened. She knew it was wrong to eavesdrop on what was clearly a private conversation, but the voice she heard wasn't her father's formal tone or Marcus's gentle diplomat cadence. This voice was crisp, authoritative, and speaking in what sounded like military terminology. The attack was too precise to be random, Marcus was saying. They knew exactly where the diplomatic reception was being held, the layout of the palace and the guard rotations. This was an inside job. "Are you certain?" That was her father's voice, but he sounded different too. Less like an emperor speaking to a subject, more like one professional consulting another. The breach point was the service entrance used by catering staff. No alarms were triggered until they were already inside the main building. Their equipment was military grade, but not any configuration I recognize from standard galactic arsenals. Someone funded this operation very well. Do you have any theories about who? Several. But I'll need access to your intelligence files to confirm them, and I'll need to know who else knew about tonight's dinner arrangements. There was a pause, then her father's voice again. Marcus, I think it's time you told me exactly who you are. Zara pressed closer to the door, her heart pounding. I'm exactly who I told you I was, Marcus replied. A human diplomat sent to facilitate better relations between our peoples. Diplomats don't move like you move tonight. They don't analyze security breaches like military intelligence officers. And they certainly don't neutralize 7 armed assassins without breaking a sweat. Another pause, longer this time. You're right, Marcus said finally. I am a diplomat, but I'm also other things, such as, Your Majesty, there are aspects of human government that we don't typically share with other species. Not because we don't trust you, but because they serve everyone better when they remain unofficial. Go on. Earth has been in contact with galactic civilization for less than 300 years. In that time, we've discovered that the galaxy is a dangerous place. Pirates, raiders, political extremists, criminal organizations, and worse. Most species have the luxury of powerful militaries and long-established intelligence networks to protect them. Humans, we've had to be more creative. Zara could hear her father moving around the room, probably pacing as he did when he was thinking hard. You're telling me that human diplomats are also spies. Some of us are more than that, Marcus said quietly. The Human Colonial Security Service has operatives throughout the galaxy. We pose as diplomats, traders, explorers, researchers. Our job is to protect human interests and human lives wherever they might be threatened. And you're one of these operatives. I'm a diplomat first, Marcus emphasized. Everything I've told you and your daughter about wanting better relations between our peoples is true. But yes, I'm also trained for situations like tonight. How extensively trained? Extensively enough. There was something in the way Marcus said those 2 words that made Zara shiver. She was beginning to understand that her husband's casual, understated way of speaking might be hiding depths she had never imagined. The marriage, her father said suddenly, was that part of your mission? No, Marcus's voice was firm. The marriage was genuine political necessity from both sides. I requested this assignment because I believed in its importance, not because I was ordered to take it. What I feel for your daughter, that's not part of any mission. Zara felt her cheeks flush at those words, though she wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment or something else. But you didn't tell her the truth about who you are? How could I? For the first time, Marcus sounded tired. How do you tell someone that the man they're marrying has killed more people than they can count? How do you explain that you've spent the last 15 years infiltrating criminal organizations, taking down slave trading rings, and eliminating threats to human colonies? You've been doing this for 15 years? Her father sounded shocked. Since I was 18. Humans mature faster than most species, and we needed people who could blend in among the younger galactic citizens. Zara did quick math in her head. Marcus was 33 now, which meant he had been doing this dangerous work for almost half his life. Tonight wasn't random, was it? Her father asked. Someone knows who you are, possibly. Or someone wanted to disrupt human-Keltharian relations and saw the reception as a target of opportunity. I won't know until I can investigate further. What do you need? Time to work. And perhaps a conversation with your daughter. She has questions and she deserves answers. Some answers, her father corrected. I won't have her put in danger because she knows too much. Agreed. Zara heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, hurrying back toward her quarters. But she wasn't fast enough. The door opened just as she reached the corner and Marcus stepped out. Princess, he said softly, we should talk. There was no point in pretending she hadn't been listening. Yes, she said, turning to face him. We should. They walked to the garden in silence. The same garden where she had first watched him practice his mysterious combat forms, though now she understood they weren't mysterious at all. They were the movements of someone trained to kill. How much did you hear? Marcus asked as they sat on the bench where she had found him that morning weeks ago. Enough to know that I don't know you at all. You know me, he said quietly. The man who talks with you at dinner, who asks about your day, who worries about making you happy in this marriage you didn't choose. That's me. It's not a lie or a cover story. It's who I am when I'm not working. And when you are working? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the stars. When I'm working, I do what needs to be done to protect people who can't protect themselves. By killing other people. Sometimes. He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight she could see the pain in his eyes. I know how that sounds. I know what it makes me. What does it make you? Dangerous. Probably someone you shouldn't be married to. Zara studied his face, thinking about everything she had learned. The people you killed tonight, they were trying to kill innocent diplomats. They had already murdered Captain Valdox. Yes. If you hadn't stopped them, how many more would have died? All of you, probably. They weren't here to make a statement or take hostages. This was an assassination mission. Then you saved our lives. I did my job. No, Zara said firmly. You saved our lives. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the garden. Finally, Zara spoke again. I'm angry at you, she said, I know. Not because of what you did tonight. Because you didn't trust me enough to tell me who you really are. Marcus turned to face her fully. Zara, what'd I do? It's classified at the highest levels of human government. If the wrong people knew about it, it could compromise operations throughout the galaxy. People could die. I understand that. But we're married. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me, he said, and the intensity in his voice surprised her. Which is why I wanted to keep you safe from this part of my life. By lying to me. By protecting you from knowledge that could get you killed. Zara felt a flicker of anger. I'm not some delicate flower who needs to be protected from reality. I'm a Keltharian princess. I've been trained in politics, strategy, and yes, even self-defense. I'm stronger than you think. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the attack, it was his genuine smile. I'm beginning to realize that. Good. Zara stood up, decision made. Because whatever happens next, we handle it together. No more secrets between us. I can keep classified information just as well as you can, and I won't be protected from my own husband's life. Marcus stood as well, looking at her with something that might have been admiration. It won't be easy. There are things about what I do that what? That will shock me? That will make me think less of you? Zara shook her head. Marcus, you're a human who spent his life protecting others. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you exactly the kind of person I want to be married to. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might argue. Then he smiled again, and this time there was relief in it. All right, he said. Partners? Partners. Zara agreed, and when they shook hands on it, she felt like she was finally meeting her husband for the first time. The crisis came 48 hours later, and it was worse than anything Zara could have imagined. She was in the Palace Communications Center with Marcus, reviewing intelligence reports about the assassination attempt, when the emergency alerts began screaming across every channel. Priority transmission from the outer defense platforms, Communications Officer Wren announced, her 4 hands flying across the control panels. Admiral Kess of the Third Fleet is requesting immediate connection with His Majesty. Emperor Valdris arrived within minutes, his formal robes hastily thrown over sleeping clothes. Put the Admiral through. Admiral Kess's image flickered to life on the main display, and Zara could see immediately that something was terribly wrong. The Admiral's usually immaculate uniform was rumpled, and there was genuine fear in his eyes. Your Majesty, Kess said without preamble, we have a situation. 3 Void Hunter fleets have emerged from dark space at the edge of our system. The communications center went dead silent. Void Hunters were legend, nightmare stories told to frighten children, an ancient species that had supposedly destroyed entire civilizations before disappearing into the deep void between galaxies. That's impossible, Emperor Valdris said. The Void Hunters vanished thousands of years ago. Nevertheless, they're here, Admiral Kess replied grimly. 47 ships of unknown configuration, but our sensors are reading energy signatures that match the old Imperial archives. And they're heading directly for Kelthara Prime. Fleet strength? The Emperor asked. We have 12 ships in the system. The Void Hunter fleet. Our tactical computers estimate they could destroy our entire civilization in approximately 6 hours. Marcus had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he stepped forward. Admiral, can you transmit the enemy ship configurations to this location? Admiral Kess looked uncertain. Mr. Chen, I appreciate your concern, but send him the data, Emperor Valdris ordered. Now! The tactical displays lit up with images of ships unlike anything Zara had ever seen. They were huge, black as space itself, and covered with what looked like organic growths rather than conventional armor. They moved in perfect formation, ignoring all attempts at communication. Marcus studied the displays with intense concentration, his expression growing darker by the moment. "How long until they reach planetary orbit?" he asked. 4 hours, 17 minutes, Admiral Kess replied. Marcus turned to Emperor Valdris. "Your Majesty, I need to make an urgent communication to Earth. Highest priority, most secure channel you have." "Marcus, what aren't you telling us?" Zara demanded. He looked at her and she saw something in his eyes that chilled her. Not fear exactly, but the kind of grim determination she associated with someone about to do something incredibly dangerous. "The Void Hunters didn't disappear," he said quietly. "They were driven away by humans." The silence that followed this statement was deafening. "That's impossible," Admiral Kess said from the display. "Humans weren't even spacefaring when the Void Hunters vanished, weren't we?" Marcus asked softly. "Admiral, how much do you really know about human history before first contact?" Emperor Valdris was staring at Marcus with growing understanding. "You're saying humans have been in space longer than we thought. Much longer. And we've been fighting the Void Hunters for over 1,000 years. Fighting them." Zara felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "Marcus, humans are barely 300 years into galactic civilization." "Officially, yes, unofficially." Marcus moved to the communications console. "Officer Wren, I need a quantum entanglement link to Earth coordinates that I'll provide. Emergency authorization code Omega 77 Alpha." "I don't have clearance for—" Wren began. "I do," Emperor Valdris said grimly. "Do as he says." As Wren worked to establish the connection, Marcus turned back to the tactical displays. The Void Hunters attack in cycles. They find a thriving civilization, harvest what they need, and move on. The cycle takes approximately 50 to 70 years, during which they stay hidden in dark space. "Harvest what they need?" Zara asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. "Life energy, specifically the neural patterns of intelligent species. They've been doing it for millennia, moving from galaxy to galaxy like locusts. And humans have been fighting them? Humans have been hunting them," Marcus corrected. "We've been tracking their cycles, predicting their targets, and preparing defenses for over 1,000 years. The communication system chimed, indicating the connection to Earth was established. "This is Commander Chen. Authorization Omega 77 Alpha." Marcus spoke into the transmitter. "Priority 1 emergency. Void Hunter contact at Kelthera Prime. Request immediate assistance." The response came back within seconds, but it was encrypted in a way that made the voice unrecognizable. "Commander Chen, this is Control. Confirm Void Hunter contact. Confirmed. 3 fleets, 47 ships, estimated arrival in 4 hours. Local defense inadequate. Understood. Phoenix Squadron is already en route to your location. To 97 minutes. Phoenix Squadron?" Marcus looked surprised. "I thought they were deployed to the Andromeda front." Situation changed. "The Void Hunters have accelerated their cycle. This is just the beginning." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, Zara saw something that made her step back. This wasn't the gentle diplomat she had married, or even the deadly operative who had saved them from assassins. This was someone else entirely. Someone harder and infinitely more dangerous. "Understood, Control." "Chen out." He turned back to the assembled group, all of whom were staring at him in various states of shock. "Your Majesty, I need you to evacuate all non-essential personnel from the palace and prepare your emergency bunkers. Admiral Kess, pull your fleet back to defensive positions around the planet, but do not engage unless directly attacked." "You're giving orders to our military?" Admiral Kess sounded outraged. "I'm trying to keep you alive," Marcus replied calmly. "Your ships aren't equipped to fight Void Hunters. If you engage them directly, they'll destroy you without slowing down. And these Phoenix Squadron ships of yours can fight them?" Emperor Valdris asked. "They were designed specifically for that purpose," Zara found her voice. "Marcus, what is Phoenix Squadron?" He looked at her for a long moment and she could see him weighing how much to tell her. "Remember when I told you that humans have had to be creative about protecting ourselves?" "Yes." "Phoenix Squadron is our most creative solution. Ships and crews that officially don't exist using technology that officially hasn't been developed yet." "What kind of technology?" "The kind that can match Void Hunter firepower." Before anyone could ask more questions, new alarms began sounding. On the tactical display, the Void Hunter fleets had changed course. They were moving faster now, and their formation had shifted into what was unmistakably an attack pattern. "They've detected the quantum communication," Marcus said grimly. "They know help is coming, and is that bad?" Zara asked. Marcus looked at the displays, calculating something in his head. "It means they'll try to finish this before Phoenix Squadron arrives." Admiral Kess, how long would it take to evacuate the major population centers? 6 hours minimum. We don't have 6 hours. Emperor Valdris stepped forward. "Marcus, whatever you're not telling us, now would be a good time to share it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that Zara could see was difficult for him. "Phoenix Squadron isn't just human ships," he said finally. "They're human-AI hybrid vessels. The crews are linked directly to artificial intelligences that process tactical information faster than any biological mind. The ships themselves are partially organic, grown rather than built. That's..." Admiral Kess struggled for words. "That's centuries beyond anything in the galactic database." "We've had a long time to prepare for this enemy," Marcus said simply. "And you?" Zara asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. "You're not just an operative, are you?" Marcus met her eyes. "No, I'm not. What are you?" He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wouldn't answer. Then very softly he said, "I'm the backup plan." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the display flashed with new contacts. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Sleek, predatory vessels that seemed to shimmer between visible and invisible as they moved. "Phoenix Squadron has arrived," Marcus announced. "And now the real fight begins." As Zara watched the impossible human ships move to intercept the Void Hunter fleets, she realized that everything she thought she knew about the galaxy, about humans, about her husband, about the nature of reality itself, was about to change forever. The battle for Kelthera Prime began with a silence that felt like the universe holding its breath. On the tactical displays in the communications center, Phoenix Squadron's 12 ships faced off against 47 Void Hunter vessels. The mathematics should have been hopeless, but as Zara watched, she began to understand that normal mathematics didn't apply to what she was seeing. The Phoenix ships moved unlike anything she had ever witnessed. They flowed through space like living things, their formations shifting and adapting in response to enemy movements with impossible speed and coordination. When the Void Hunters opened fire, the human vessels weren't there anymore. They had somehow anticipated the attack and moved before the weapons fired. "How are they doing that?" Admiral Kess whispered from his position in the fleet. Marcus was standing perfectly still, his eyes closed and his hands resting on the communication console. Zara noticed that his fingers were moving slightly as if he were typing on an invisible keyboard. "Marcus," she said softly. His eyes opened, but for a moment they seemed unfocused, as if he were seeing something far away. "The Phoenix ships use predictive combat algorithms," he said, his voice oddly distant. "They calculate probable enemy actions and respond before the enemy has finished deciding what to do. But how can they process information that fast?" "They're not just processing information," Marcus said. And now his voice sounded completely different, mechanical, cold. "They're sharing it instantaneously across the entire network." Zara felt a chill of understanding. "Network?" "The Phoenix ships, their AI systems, and their crews are all linked through quantum neural interfaces. They think as one mind distributed across multiple platforms." "That's impossible," Emperor Valdris said. "The processing power required would be astronomical," Marcus agreed. "Unless you had additional computing resources to draw on." On the display, the battle was intensifying. The Void Hunter ships were adapting to Phoenix Squadron's tactics, their black hulls beginning to glow with malevolent energy. When they fired, space itself seemed to tear, and one of the Phoenix ships took a direct hit. Zara watched in horror as the sleek vessel spun out of control, its hull cracking and venting atmosphere. But instead of exploding or going dead, something extraordinary happened. The other Phoenix ships seemed to flow toward their damaged comrade, and streams of light began connecting them. "They're sharing structural integrity," Marcus said, answering Zara's unspoken question. "The damaged ship is being supported by the rest of the fleet. How is that possible?" "Because they're not really separate ships," Marcus said quietly. "They're components of a single organism." As if responding to his words, the Phoenix ship suddenly changed tactics. Instead of fighting as individual vessels, they began moving in perfect synchronization, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns that created destructive interference in the Void Hunter energy shields. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Void Hunter ships began exploding in brilliant flashes of dark energy, their ancient hulls no match for weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. But the victory came at a cost. Zara could see that the Phoenix ships were taking damage, their organic hulls showing signs of strain from the prolonged engagement. "They can't keep this up," she said. "No," Marcus agreed. "They can't." He turned away from the display and began typing commands into the communication console with inhuman speed. The quantum encryption that had protected his earlier conversations was gone. Now his transmissions were going out on multiple channels simultaneously. "All Phoenix units. This is Control Prime," he said into the transmitter, and Zara's blood went cold at the authority in his voice. "Initiate Protocol 7. Authorization Marcus Alpha 001. The response was immediate. "Control Prime, this is Phoenix Leader. Confirming Protocol 7, sir, are you certain?" "I'm certain, Phoenix Leader. Execute immediately." "Understood, sir. Beginning Protocol 7 now." On the tactical display, the Phoenix ships suddenly stopped fighting defensively. Instead, they formed a tight formation and began accelerating directly toward the largest Void Hunter vessel. "What's Protocol 7? Zara asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was watching the display with the intensity of someone making calculations that would determine whether civilizations lived or died. "Marcus," Emperor Valdris said sharply, "what is Protocol 7? "The Phoenix ships are going to link together and create a resonance cascade in the Void Hunter command vessel's dark energy core," Marcus said flatly. "It will destroy the entire enemy fleet." "That sounds like good news," Admiral Kess said from his ship. "It will also destroy Phoenix Squadron," Marcus continued, "and any ship within 100,000 kilometers of the detonation point." The communications center fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of alarms from other parts of the palace. "You're ordering those crews to commit suicide," Zara said quietly. "Yes. How can you?" She began, then stopped. The expression on Marcus's face wasn't that of someone making a cold tactical decision. It was the expression of someone in agony. "Those crews volunteered for this mission knowing what it might require," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're buying time for 40 billion Keltharian civilians to evacuate. But there has to be another way. There isn't." Marcus's voice was final. "I've run every simulation, considered every alternative. This is the only option that saves your people." On the display, the Phoenix ships had reached the Void Hunter command vessel. Streams of energy began connecting them, and the space around the enemy fleet started to distort. "Phoenix Leader to Control Prime," came the voice from the transmitter. "Resonance cascade initiated." "It's been an honor, sir." "The honor was mine," Marcus replied, and Zara could hear the pain in his voice. "Thank you for everything." The explosion, when it came, was like watching a star being born and die in the same instant. A sphere of pure energy expanded from the Void Hunter fleet, and when it faded, both the enemy ships and Phoenix Squadron were gone. The tactical display showed empty space where 47 Void Hunter vessels and 12 Phoenix ships had been moments before. "Confirmed. Kills on all enemy vessels," Admiral Kess reported, his voice filled with awe and horror. "The threat has been eliminated." Marcus stood perfectly still for a long moment, then slowly removed his hands from the communication console. "Marcus," Zara said softly. "I'm sorry. I know those crews were—" "They weren't just crews," Marcus interrupted, his voice hollow. "They were family." "What do you mean?" Marcus turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw a grief so profound that it made her step back. "The Phoenix pilots are all volunteers from the Human Colonial Security Service. People I've worked with, trained with, fought beside for years. Phoenix Leader was my former partner. The navigator on Phoenix 3 was my little sister." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. "Your sister?" "Amy, she was 26. Marcus's voice was perfectly controlled, but Zara could see his hands shaking. "She joined the program because she wanted to protect people, just like her big brother." Emperor Valdris stepped forward. "Marcus, I'm deeply sorry for your loss, but I need to understand what just happened here. You gave orders to Phoenix Squadron like you were their commanding officer." "Because I am their commanding officer," Marcus said quietly. You're a diplomatic attaché. No, Your Majesty. I'm Admiral Marcus Chen, Supreme Commander of the Human Colonial Security Service and Director of the Phoenix Program. The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Admiral, Zara whispered. I've been running humanity's defense against the Void Hunters for the past 8 years. Marcus continued. The diplomatic assignment to Kelthera was real, but it was also a chance for me to step back from command duties for a while, to try to have something resembling a normal life. But you just... Emperor Valdris struggled for words. You just commanded the defense of our entire civilization. Yes, from our communication center. The quantum neural link works anywhere in the galaxy, Marcus explained. I've been connected to the Phoenix network this entire time. Every tactical decision, every ship movement, every weapons firing sequence, it all goes through me. Zara stared at her husband, trying to reconcile the gentleman she had married with the military commander who had just orchestrated the destruction of an ancient enemy fleet. You've been carrying this responsibility our entire marriage, she said. I never stopped being responsible for humanity's defense, Marcus said. Even on our wedding day, even during quiet dinners together, there was always a part of my mind connected to the network, monitoring threats, making decisions that affect the survival of our species. That's why you were always so calm, Zara realized. No matter what happened, you never seemed surprised or overwhelmed. Because I'm used to dealing with crises where billions of lives hang in the balance, and the simple diplomatic persona was the closest thing to a vacation I've had in 8 years. Marcus looked around the communications center, taking in the stares of shock and awe from everyone present. I'm sorry for the deception, he said formally. But now you understand why human government protocols are so strict about classified information. What you've learned today could destabilize the entire galactic political structure if it became public knowledge. Why? Emperor Valdris, a